The supply train was 3 days late, and Iron Creek was running out of patience. Rowan Mercer stood outside Fletcher's trading post, one boot propped against the warped wooden planks, watching the horizon where the rail line cut through the valley like a scar. His breath came out in white clouds. November cold had teeth this year, the kind that bit straight through wool and leather, and reminded a man that the mountains didn't care whether he lived or died. Behind him, the settlement crawled with the usual late-season panic. Ranchers loading wagons with flour and salt. Miners stocking up before the passes closed. Women haggling over the last bolts of decent fabric before 6 months of isolation set in. Everyone knew the same truth. Once the first real storm hit, Iron Creek would be cut off from the outside world until spring thaw. Rowan didn't mind isolation. He preferred it. "You hear anything about that train?" Fletcher emerged from the post, wiping his hands on a filthy apron. He was a short man with a belly that suggested he took more than his fair share of the inventory. "No. Damn shame. Got 36 orders waiting. People are getting restless." Rowan didn't answer. He'd learned years ago that most conversations didn't require his participation. People talked whether you listened or not. "You heading back up to that ranch of yours after this?" "That's the idea. Awful lonely up there, especially come winter." Rowan finally looked at him. Fletcher took a step back. Most people did when Rowan looked at them directly. He'd been told his eyes were cold, that they belonged to someone who'd seen too much and felt too little. He didn't argue with that assessment. "I like lonely," Rowan said. Fletcher laughed nervously and retreated back inside. Rowan returned his attention to the horizon. The truth was simpler than Fletcher imagined. Rowan had spent 15 years as a frontier scout, riding ahead of wagon trains and cavalry units, tracking hostile war parties through terrain that had killed better men than him. He'd buried 3 brothers, 2 wives of fellow scouts, and more friends than he cared to count. Every single one of them had died because someone made a mistake, got careless, or trusted the wrong person. So Rowan stopped trusting. He bought a remote ranch up in the high country, miles from anyone else, raised cattle, trapped in winter, and spoke to maybe 5 people a year. It wasn't much of a life, but it was his, and nobody could take it from him. Then the train whistle cut through the valley. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the horses went still, ears pricked forward. The sound echoed off the surrounding cliffs, lonely and distant, like a ghost calling from the past. "Finally," someone muttered. The train rolled into the Iron Creek station 20 minutes later, belching black smoke and grinding metal. It was a small freight line, just 3 cars and a passenger compartment that looked like it had survived a war, which, in a way, it probably had. Rowan watched the platform fill with people, ranchers shouting for their supplies, the station master trying to organize the chaos and failing miserably, Fletcher waddling toward the freight car like a man heading to church. Then Rowan saw her. She stepped down from the passenger car slowly, carefully, like someone who wasn't sure the ground would hold her weight. She wore a dark gray traveling dress that had seen better days and a coat too thin for Wyoming weather. Her hair was pulled back severe and tight. She carried one weathered trunk, struggling with the weight, and looked around the platform like she'd just arrived on a different planet, which Rowan supposed she had. Eastern woman. That much was obvious. Everything about her screamed it, the way she held herself, the cut of her clothes, the pale skin that hadn't seen enough sun or wind. Iron Creek didn't get many Eastern women. The ones who came usually lasted about 6 weeks before crawling back onto the next train east, defeated by the cold and the isolation and the sheer brutal indifference of frontier life. This one looked like she might not last 6 days. "Well, well," Sheriff Marcus Tate emerged from the crowd, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. He was a big man gone soft around the middle, the kind who relied on his badge more than his ability. "Who do we have here?" The woman turned to face him. "Sheriff?" "That's right. You got a name, miss." "Evelyn. Evelyn Vale." "And what brings you to Iron Creek, Miss Vale?" She reached into her coat and produced a folded letter. Her hands were shaking, though whether from cold or nerves, Rowan couldn't tell. "I was told there's a position available. Teaching." Tate took the letter, but didn't read it. "Teaching? Who told you that?" "Mr. Wendell Hayes. He wrote to me in Philadelphia, said the settlement needed someone educated, someone who could—" "Wendell Hayes has been dead for 4 months." The color drained from Evelyn's face. "What?" "Caught pneumonia last July. Died 3 days later. Tate handed the letter back. So, unless you've got other business here, I'd suggest you get back on that train before it leaves. But I sold everything I owned. I don't have anything left back east. Not my problem. Rowan watched the exchange from across the platform. He should have looked away. Should have minded his own business. Should have collected his supplies and ridden back to the ranch before the weather turned. Instead, he noticed something that made him go very still. When Evelyn had reached for the letter, her sleeve had pulled back slightly, just enough to reveal dark bruises circling her left wrist like a bracelet. Old bruises, yellowing at the edges, the kind that came from someone grabbing hard and not letting go. There's no other work here, Tate was saying, and we don't need more mouths to feed come winter. Best thing you can do is head back where you came from. I can work, Evelyn said quietly. Whatever needs doing. I'm not afraid of hard work. One of the ranchers nearby laughed. Lady, you ever hauled water in 20 below weather? Ever birthed a calf? Ever gone 3 days without eating because the supply train didn't make it through? No, but then you got no business being here. More laughter rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's face flushed red, but she didn't cry. Rowan gave her credit for that. Most Eastern women would have been in tears by now. Look, Tate said, trying to sound reasonable and failing. I'm sure you're a nice lady, but this territory isn't for you. Winter's coming fast, and we barely got enough for our own people. You understand? I understand that Mr. Hayes made me a promise. Hayes is dead. Promises don't outlive the people who make them. Evelyn stood there, clutching her trunk, looking like someone who'd just realized they'd bet everything on the wrong hand. The crowd was already losing interest, turning back to their own business. In another minute, she'd be completely forgotten. Rowan knew he should walk away. Instead, he stepped forward. She can stay at my place. The entire platform went silent. Every head turned toward him. Tate's expression cycled through confusion, surprise, and then something that looked almost like anger. What did you say? Rowan kept his eyes on Evelyn. She was staring at him like he'd just grown a second head. I said she can stay at my ranch. Got an extra room. She can work off her keep. Mercer, you've been alone up there for 5 years. Now you suddenly want company? I didn't say I wanted company. I said she can stay. Tate stepped closer, lowering his voice. You got any idea what people are going to say about this? Don't care what people say. She's a stranger. You don't know anything about her. Don't know anything about most people. Doesn't usually stop them from existing. Someone in the crowd snickered. Tate's face darkened. This is a bad idea, Mercer. Probably. Rowan finally looked at the sheriff. But it's my bad idea to make. He turned to Evelyn. Up close, she looked even more fragile than he'd thought. Thin face, hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. But there was something in those eyes, something that reminded him of cornered animals he'd tracked over the years. Scared, yes. Desperate, absolutely. But not broken. Not yet. Can you ride a horse? He asked. Yes. A little. Can you cook? Yes. Clean, mend, handle livestock? I can learn. Rowan studied her for another moment, then picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing. Wagons at Fletcher's. We leave in an hour. He started walking before she could respond. Behind him, he heard Tate say, Miss Vale, you sure about this? That man's not right in the head. Spent too many years in the wild. Neither am I, Evelyn said quietly, and I don't have anywhere else to go. Fletcher's trading post smelled like tobacco, leather, and something that might have been dead for a week. Rowan loaded his supplies into the wagon bed: flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, kerosene, dried beans, while Fletcher tallied up the cost with the enthusiasm of a man calculating his own fortune. That's $68, Fletcher announced. Rowan counted out the money without comment. So, Fletcher leaned on the counter. You really taking that woman up to your ranch? Seems like. People are going to talk. Let them. I'm serious, Mercer. A man like you, living alone all these years, suddenly bringing home a woman young enough to... Careful. Rowan's voice didn't rise, but Fletcher shut up immediately. Real careful about how you finish that sentence. Fletcher raised his hands. Just saying what others are going to say. Then they can say it to my face instead of yours. Rowan gathered the last of his supplies and headed for the door. Outside, Evelyn was sitting on her trunk near the wagon, looking lost. A few townspeople stared at her as they passed, not bothering to hide their curiosity or judgment. "You know how to handle a rifle?" Rowan asked as he loaded the supplies. "No." "You're going to learn. We got wolves up in the high country. They get bold when they're hungry, and they're always hungry come winter." Evelyn stood up slowly. "Why are you helping me?" It was a fair question. Rowan didn't have a good answer. "Saw your wrist," he said finally, "when you reached for that letter." Her hand immediately went to her sleeve, pulling it down. "I don't know what you Don't lie to me. If you're going to be under my roof, we start with honesty. Someone hurt you back east?" She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." "He follow you here?" "I don't think so." "That's not a no?" "I don't know," she said, and for the first time real fear crept into her voice. "I hope not." Rowan finished securing the supplies, then turned to face her directly. "Listen close, because I'm only saying this once. Life up at that ranch is hard. Harder than anything you've dealt with in Philadelphia or wherever you come from. It's cold, it's isolated, and there's no one around for miles. You'll work from sunup to sundown, and some days that still won't be enough. If you can't handle that, tell me now." "I can handle it." "You say that now. Wait until you're hauling water from a frozen creek at 4 a.m. I said I can handle it." There was steel in her voice this time. Rowan recognized that tone. It was the same one he'd heard from soldiers who'd decided they'd rather die fighting than live running. "All right then," he gestured to the wagon. "Get in." They left Iron Creek an hour before sunset, the wagon creaking under the weight of supplies. The road, if it could be called that, wound up into the foothills, following an old mining trail that turned treacherous when wet. The temperature dropped with every mile gained in elevation. Evelyn sat beside him on the bench, wrapped in her inadequate coat, shivering. Rowan didn't offer his blanket. She'd need to toughen up if she was going to survive the winter. "How far is your ranch?" she asked after an hour of silence. "Another 3 hours, maybe 4 if we hit ice." "And you make this trip alone?" "Usually." "Doesn't that get lonely?" "Lonely's better than dead. People get you killed out here. They make mistakes. They panic. They do stupid things when they're scared. Easier to rely on yourself." "That's a bleak way to see the world." "World's a bleak place." They rode in silence after that. The sun disappeared behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Rowan had cared about such things. Stars began emerging overhead, cold and distant. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said eventually. "You just did. Why did you really offer to help me? It wasn't just the bruises." Rowan was quiet for a while, guiding the horses around a rocky switchback. When he finally answered, his voice was rougher than usual. "Had a sister once, Sarah. She got married to a man who seemed decent enough. Turned out he wasn't. She stayed with him anyway because that's what women did back then. Stayed until one day he broke her neck in a drunken rage." Evelyn drew in a sharp breath. "Found out about it 3 months later," Rowan continued. "I was scouting for the cavalry at the time, miles from anywhere. By the time I got back, she was already buried. Her husband had disappeared and nobody seemed too interested in finding him." "I'm sorry." "Don't want your sorry, just want you to understand something. I'm not a good man, I'm not kind, I'm not patient, and I sure as hell ain't a saint. But I don't stand by and watch women get hurt when I can do something about it. That's the one line I won't cross." "What happened to your sister's husband?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "Found him 2 years later in a saloon in Cheyenne. He didn't walk out." Evelyn didn't ask for clarification. She didn't need to. They reached the ranch just after midnight. It sat in a small valley surrounded by pine forest, a modest log structure with a barn, a small corral, and a creek that ran clear most of the year. Smoke rose from the chimney. Rowan had left a fire banked before leaving. "This is it," he said, climbing down from the wagon. Evelyn looked around, taking in the isolation. The nearest neighbor was 8 miles away. The nearest town was Iron Creek, and that was a hard half-day's ride. She'd just committed herself to spending the winter in one of the most remote locations in Wyoming territory with a man she'd known for all of 6 hours. Most women would have been terrified. Evelyn just nodded. "It's perfect." Rowan showed her to the extra room, a small space off the main cabin that had probably been a storage area before. It had a narrow bed, a chair, and a window that looked out over the valley. Not much, but more than she'd expected. "Fire's in the main room," he said. "Keeps both rooms warm enough to survive. Water pump's outside, but it'll freeze solid in another few weeks. I'll show you the root cellar tomorrow. Food's stored there." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Sun's up in 5 hours and we've got work to do." He left her alone. Through the wall, she could hear him moving around the main cabin, banking the fire, settling in for the night. Evelyn sat on the bed, still wearing her coat, and looked down at her hands. They were shaking. She'd done it. She'd actually escaped. Put 3,000 miles between herself and Philadelphia. Between herself and the men who'd killed her father. Between herself and the life that had tried to destroy her. But she knew it wasn't over. Men like Silas Granger didn't give up. They didn't forget. And they sure as hell didn't forgive people who'd witnessed things they weren't supposed to see. Evelyn pulled off her gloves and looked at the bruises on her wrists. They'd fade eventually. The memories wouldn't. She lay down without undressing, too exhausted to care. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a sound both lonely and hungry. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried not to think about how similar that sounded to her own life. "Teti." She woke to someone pounding on her door. "Sun's up. Time to work." Evelyn jolted upright, disoriented. Weak gray light filtered through the window. Her entire body ached from the wagon ride, and the room was cold enough that she could see her breath. "I'm coming," she called out, her voice hoarse. She dressed quickly, wincing at how stiff her muscles were. When she emerged into the main cabin, Rowan was already dressed and pouring coffee from a battered pot on the stove. "Breakfast is bacon and bread," he said without looking at her. "Coffee's strong. You drink it?" "Yes." He poured her a cup and handed it over. The coffee was, in fact, strong enough to dissolve iron. Evelyn forced herself to drink it anyway. "Today I'm going to show you the property," Rowan said. "Where everything is, how things work. You'll need to know all of it before the first real snow hits. When will that be? Could be tomorrow, could be next week, and that's why we start now." They spent the morning walking the property. Rowan showed her the barn where the cattle sheltered during storms, the chicken coop that needed constant reinforcement against predators, the root cellar dug into the hillside where vegetables and dried meat were stored. He taught her how to work the water pump before it froze, how to split wood properly, how to recognize signs of wolves near the livestock. Evelyn absorbed it all, asking questions when she didn't understand, taking mental notes. Her hands blistered from the work. Her back screamed in protest. She ignored both. By noon, they were mending a section of fence that had been damaged by elk. "You ever done any physical labor before?" Rowan asked, watching her struggle with a fence post. "No, I was a governess back east, teaching children from wealthy families." "That why you came out here, teaching job?" "That was part of it." "What's the other part?" Evelyn drove the post into the ground with more force than necessary. "I told you. Someone hurt me. I needed to leave." "Who?" "Does it matter?" "Might. If they come looking for you." She stopped working and looked at him directly. "They won't find me here." "You sure about that?" "No." She went back to the fence. "But I'm hoping." They worked in silence after that. Rowan had to admit the woman was tougher than she looked. She didn't complain, didn't ask for breaks, didn't cry when she split her thumb on a piece of barbed wire, just wrapped it in cloth and kept going. Maybe she'd survived the winter after all. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and turned the valley into shades of gold and shadow, they sat on the porch eating a simple dinner of beans and cornbread. The temperature was dropping fast and Rowan could smell snow in the air. "Storm's coming," he said. "Big one. We'll need to bring the cattle in closer tomorrow." Evelyn nodded, too tired to speak. "You did good today," Rowan added. "Better than I expected." "I told you I could work." Saying it and doing it are different things. Most people from the East, they think they know what hard work is. They don't. They think they can handle the frontier. They can't. "And what do you think about me?" Rowan looked at her. In the fading light, she looked almost ghostly, pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, hair coming loose from its tight arrangement. But there was something else there, too. Something stubborn and unyielding. I think you're running from something bad enough that you'd rather freeze to death in Wyoming than go back to it, he said. And I think whatever you're running from is going to catch up eventually. They always do. Evelyn's hand went to her wrist again, an unconscious gesture. If they do, will you help me? I'll do what needs doing. That's not an answer. It's the only one I got. They finished dinner in silence. Evelyn helped clean up, then retreated to her room. Through the wall, Rowan could hear her moving around, settling in for the night. He sat by the fire for a long time after that, rifle across his lap, staring into the flames. He told himself he was done getting involved in other people's problems, done putting his neck on the line for strangers, done caring about anything except his own survival. But then he'd seen those bruises, and he'd thought about Sarah, and he'd made a choice that was probably going to get him killed. Rowan checked the rifle's ammunition, made sure the door was barred, and banked the fire for the night. Outside, the wind was picking up. The storm would hit by morning. He just hoped they were ready for it. The snow started falling 3 hours before dawn. Rowan woke to the sound of wind battering the cabin and knew immediately it was bad. He dressed in the dark, grabbed his coat and rifle, and stepped outside into a world that had turned white and hostile. The storm had come in fast and mean. Snow fell so thick he could barely see the barn 50 yards away. The wind cut through his coat like it wasn't even there, and the temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees overnight. He made his way to the barn, fighting through drifts that were already knee-deep. The cattle were restless, sensing the storm's fury. He checked on them quickly, made sure they had enough hay, then fought his way back to the cabin. Evelyn was awake when he came in, already dressed and stoking the fire. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad enough. We're snowed in for at least a few days." "What do we do?" "We wait it out, keep the fire going, ration the food, and make sure the livestock doesn't freeze." "I can help with that." "No. Storm like this, you go out there, you die. Simple as that." Evelyn looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she made coffee while Rowan checked the cabin's supplies. They had enough food for a month, enough firewood for 2 weeks if they were careful. The cattle would be fine in the barn as long as the structure held. They spent the day mostly in silence. There wasn't much to say, and the storm made conversation difficult anyway. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the shutters and finding every crack in the walls. Snow piled up against the windows, blocking out most of the light. By evening, the cabin felt like a fragile island in an ocean of white chaos. "You ever been in a storm like this?" Evelyn asked as they ate dinner. "Plenty of times. And you survived all of them, obviously." "Survived ain't the same as living." She studied him across the table. "You're a hard man to understand. I'm a simple man. People just make things complicated. Nothing about you is simple." Rowan didn't respond. He'd learned over the years that there was a difference between being honest and being understood. Most people didn't want honesty anyway. They wanted comfort, reassurance, lies that made the world seem less brutal than it really was. "Why did you become a scout?" Evelyn asked. "Needed work. Army was hiring." "That's it?" "That's it." "I don't believe you." Rowan looked up from his plate. "You calling me a liar? I'm saying there's more to it than that. Nobody spends 15 years tracking war parties through hostile territory just because they need work. Maybe I liked being alone. Or maybe you were running from something too." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Rowan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Evelyn looked like she regretted speaking. "We all got ghosts," Rowan said finally. "Difference is, mine are buried, yours are still breathing." "How do you know that?" "Because dead men don't leave bruises." Evelyn pulled her sleeves down reflexively. "I don't want to talk about it." "Fair enough, but sooner or later you're going to have to. Secrets like that, they got a way of coming out when you least expect them." "Speaking from experience?" "Always." The storm raged for 3 days straight. 3 days of howling wind and endless snow. 3 days trapped inside a small cabin with nothing to do but wait and try not to think too hard about the isolation. On the 4th day, the storm broke. Rowan woke to silence. Not complete silence. Wind still whispered through the trees, and the creek gurgled under a layer of ice, but the furious roar of the blizzard was gone. He stepped outside into a transformed world. Snow covered everything in thick drifts, turning the valley into something alien and beautiful. The sky was painfully blue, the sun bright enough to make his eyes water. Behind him, he heard Evelyn emerge from the cabin. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's deadly. Beautiful things usually are." They spent the day digging out, clearing paths to the barn, checking on the cattle, making sure none of the structures had collapsed under the snow's weight. Evelyn worked without complaint, though Rowan could see the exhaustion in her movements. By evening, they were both too tired to do much more than collapse near the fire. "How long until the next storm?" Evelyn asked. "Could be a week, could be tomorrow. Winter doesn't run on a schedule out here." "How do you stand it? The uncertainty?" Rowan thought about that. Certainty's an illusion. People like to think they're in control, that they can plan their lives and have things work out the way they want. Then the world reminds them they're not as important as they thought. That's a depressing way to live. It's an honest way. Evelyn pulled her knees up to her chest, staring into the fire. "The man who hurt me, the one I ran from. His name is Silas Granger. He's a land broker, works for the railroad buying up property for expansion west." Rowan went very still. "My father worked as a surveyor," she continued. "Honest man. He discovered that Granger and his associates were stealing land from homesteaders, falsifying deeds, and then selling the property to the railroad at inflated prices. When my father tried to report it, they killed him, made it look like an accident." "And you witnessed this?" "I saw them meeting afterward, heard them talking about it. They didn't know I was there." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "Granger realized I knew. He came to the house, tried to convince me to keep quiet." The bruises. Rowan understood now. "When I wouldn't cooperate, he threatened to kill me too. I ran that same night, took what little money we had and bought a ticket on the first train west. I thought if I could get far enough away, remote enough, he'd give up looking." "Men like that don't give up," Rowan said quietly. "They can't afford to. If word got out about what they've been doing, the whole operation falls apart." "I know, but I'm hoping Wyoming territory is far enough, remote enough, that he'll decide I'm not worth the trouble." "You're hoping, but you don't believe it." Evelyn was quiet for a long time. "No," she whispered, "I don't." Rowan stared into the fire, thinking. He'd spent 5 years avoiding exactly this kind of situation, avoiding other people's problems, their conflicts, their enemies. He'd built a life specifically designed to keep the world at arm's length. And now here he was, harboring a fugitive witness to murder and fraud, with a ruthless land broker potentially hunting her across half the country. He should have turned her away at the train station, should have let the sheriff handle it, should have minded his own damned business. But he'd seen those bruises, and he'd thought about Sarah. "All right," he said finally. "All right, what?" "All right, you can stay. Through the winter at minimum. After that, we'll figure out what comes next." "You don't have to—" "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. But we do this my way. You work, you learn to shoot, and if trouble comes looking, you don't panic. Understood?" Evelyn nodded, something like hope flickering in her eyes. "Understood." "Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we start training." She stood up slowly, then paused at the door to her room. "Rowan?" "What?" "Thank you for not turning me away." "Don't thank me yet. Winter's just started, and trouble's got a habit of showing up when you least expect it." "I know, but still, thank you." She disappeared into her room. Rowan sat by the fire for another hour, rifle across his lap, staring at the flames and thinking about choices and consequences and the ways that trying to do the right thing usually ended up getting you killed. Outside, the night was cold and clear and full of stars. Somewhere out there, maybe in a city far away, or maybe closer than either of them realized, a man named Silas Granger was making plans, and Rowan Mercer was preparing for war. The next morning arrived with the kind of cold that made breathing painful. Rowan was already outside when Evelyn emerged from the cabin, her breath forming white clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. He stood near the corral, rifle in hand, staring out at the tree line. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Tracks. Wolfpack came through last night, got close to the barn." Evelyn looked where he was pointing. She could barely make out the disturbed snow, but Rowan read it like other people read newspapers. "They kill anything?" "Not yet, but they're getting bold. That means they're hungry. He turned to face her. Which is why you're learning to shoot today. He led her to a clearing behind the cabin where he'd set up targets, pieces of wood propped against hay bales. The rifle he handed her was heavy, the metal cold enough to burn her bare hands. First rule, Rowan said, never point this at anything you don't intend to kill. Second rule, assume it's always loaded even when it's not. Third rule, respect what it can do. This isn't some parlor game. You pull that trigger, something dies. Evelyn nodded, gripping the rifle awkwardly. Your stance is wrong. Rowan moved behind her, adjusting her position. Feet shoulder width apart. Stock tight against your shoulder or the recoil will knock you flat. Sight down the barrel, breathe out slow, squeeze the trigger, don't pull it. I've never killed anything before. You will if you stay here long enough. Might be a wolf, might be something worse. He stepped back. Now shoot. The first shot went wide, kicking dirt up 3 feet left of the target. The recoil slammed into her shoulder hard enough to make her stagger. Her ears rang. Again. The second shot was closer, but still missed. The third clipped the edge of the wood. By the 10th shot, her shoulder was bruising and her hands were shaking from cold and effort. Enough, Rowan said. You're flinching, anticipating the recoil instead of controlling it. I'm trying. Trying doesn't keep you alive. Hitting your target does. He took the rifle from her. We'll practice every day until you can hit center mass at 50 yards without thinking about it. They spent the rest of the morning working the ranch. Rowan taught her how to check the cattle for frostbite, how to break ice on the water troughs, how to spot signs of illness in the livestock. Every task was harder than the last, and Evelyn's body screamed in protest. Around noon, they saw riders approaching from the south. Rowan's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His hand went to his rifle, and he positioned himself between Evelyn and the approaching horses. Get inside, he said quietly. Who is it? Don't know yet. That's why you're getting inside. Evelyn retreated to the cabin but watched through the window. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, 2 men and a woman, all bundled against the cold. They looked more curious than hostile, but Rowan didn't lower the rifle. The lead rider was a weathered man in his 50s with a gray beard and kind eyes. He raised one hand in greeting. Easy there, Mercer. Just neighbors checking in after the storm. Rowan relaxed slightly but didn't put the rifle down. Tom, haven't seen you in town for a while. Wanted to make sure the storm didn't bury you up here. Takes more than snow to kill me. Tom's eyes drifted to the cabin, where Evelyn's silhouette was visible in the window. Heard you took in that woman from the train, the one who showed up looking for Hayes. Word travels fast. Always does. Tom shifted in his saddle. People are talking, Rowan, saying it's strange you living alone all these years and suddenly bringing home a stranger. People can say whatever they want. I'm not here to judge. Just thought you should know the sheriff's been asking questions about her, where she came from, why she's here, whether she's running from something. Rowan's jaw tightened. Tate needs to mind his own business. Maybe, but he's got folks in town worried. Winter's hard enough without unknowns in the mix. Tom glanced back at the cabin. She seems decent enough from what I saw at the station. Scared, but decent. She works hard, keeps to herself. That's all anyone needs to know. Fair enough. Tom gathered his reins. Just be careful, Rowan. Strangers bring complications, and complications get people killed out here. I'll keep that in mind. The riders left, their horses kicking up snow as they disappeared back into the trees. Rowan stood there for a long time after they were gone, staring at nothing. Evelyn came outside. They seemed friendly. Friendly doesn't mean safe. Tom's a good man, but he's right about one thing. People are talking. That means attention. Attention means questions. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause problems for you. Too late for sorry. Damage is done. He finally looked at her. You need to understand something. This territory, it's not like the East. Out here, people survive by knowing their neighbors, trusting the right folks, and being suspicious of everyone else. You're an outsider, which makes you a threat until proven otherwise. What do? We keep our heads down, do our work, and hope interest dies out before winter does. But interest didn't die out. Over the next 2 weeks, more visitors came. Some were genuinely concerned about Rowan's welfare. Others were clearly fishing for information about Evelyn. A few were openly hostile, suggesting that a woman with no family and no clear history didn't belong in Iron Creek. Rowan turned them all away with the same cold indifference he showed everything else. Meanwhile, Evelyn was changing. The soft Eastern woman who'd stepped off the train was being stripped away by the brutal reality of frontier life. Her hands, once smooth and pale, were now calloused and scarred. Her face had thinned, the hollows in her cheeks more pronounced. She moved differently, too, less hesitant, more purposeful. And she was learning to shoot. 3 weeks after arriving, she finally hit the center target at 50 yards. Rowan watched without comment, then set up a new target at 75 yards. "You're harder than any teacher I ever had," she said, reloading the rifle. "Teachers don't prepare you for men with guns." "Is that what you think is coming? Men with guns?" "I think trouble always finds people who are running from it. Question is whether you'll be ready when it does." That night, as they sat by the fire eating venison stew, Evelyn asked the question she'd been avoiding for weeks. "Why haven't you asked me for details about what happened in Philadelphia, about Granger, about what I saw?" Rowan was quiet for a while. "Because details don't change the situation. You're here, he might come looking, and when he does, we'll deal with it. Everything else is just noise." "Most people would want to know." "I'm not most people." "No," she agreed. "You're not." She set down her bowl and looked at him across the fire. "Can I ask you something else?" "You're going to anyway. What happened to you, out there during your time as a scout?" Rowan's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Why do you want to know?" "Because you're the most closed-off person I've ever met, and I'm wondering what it takes to make someone build walls that high." "Smart people build walls. Keeps them alive. It also keeps them alone. Alone is safe. Alone is lonely." Rowan stood up abruptly. "I'm checking the barn." He grabbed his rifle and coat and walked out into the darkness, leaving Evelyn by the fire. She watched him go, knowing she'd touched something raw. Outside, Rowan stood in the snow, breathing hard. The memories were always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for moments like this to crawl back up. He remembered the Clearwater Massacre. Summer of 1878. A wagon train he'd been scouting for, 37 people, including women and children. They'd been ambushed at dawn by a war party 50 strong. Rowan had been 2 miles ahead, checking the trail. By the time he got back, it was over. He'd found Sarah's friend Martha among the dead. She'd been traveling with her 2 daughters. The youngest was 5 years old. After that, Rowan had requested reassignment to solo scouting missions. No more wagon trains. No more families. No more people depending on him to keep them safe. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw those bodies. And he knew that if he'd been there, if he'd stayed with the train instead of riding ahead, maybe some of them would have survived. Or maybe he'd just be dead with the rest of them. He stood there for a long time, letting the cold seep into his bones before finally going back inside. Evelyn was still by the fire, but she didn't ask any more questions. They sat in silence until the fire burned low, then retreated to their separate rooms. December arrived with more snow and colder temperatures. The ranch settled into a rhythm: wake before dawn, tend the livestock, chop wood, haul water, practice shooting, repair whatever broke during the night. The work was endless and exhausting, but it kept them busy enough that conversation remained minimal. Then one morning, Rowan woke to find fresh tracks in the snow outside the cabin. Boot prints. Human. Someone had been watching the house during the night. He followed the tracks to the tree line, where they disappeared into the forest. Whoever it was, they knew how to move without leaving an obvious trail. Rowan returned to the cabin to find Evelyn already awake, stoking the fire. "We had a visitor last night," he said. Her face went pale. "Who?" "Don't know, but they were watching the cabin for at least an hour based on the tracks." "Granger?" "Could be. Could be someone from town being nosy. Could be a drifter looking for an easy target." He checked his rifle. "Either way, we're not taking chances. From now on, one of us stays awake at night. We'll take shifts." "You think they'll come back?" "If they're smart, no. If they're desperate or stupid, yes." That night, Rowan took the first watch. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, staring out at the moonlit snow. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made his finger tighten on the trigger. Around midnight, Evelyn emerged from her room, wrapped in a blanket. "Can't sleep?" Rowan asked without turning around. "No, keep thinking about those tracks." "Thinking doesn't help. Either they come back or they don't." She sat down across from him. "Don't you ever get tired of being so fatalistic?" Fatalism keeps you realistic. Optimism gets you killed. There has to be a middle ground. If there is, I haven't found it. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees. "Tell me about your sister," Evelyn said quietly. Rowan's hands tightened on the rifle. "Why?" "Because you mentioned her once, and then never again. And I think she's the reason you're helping me." Sarah was younger than me by 3 years, smart, stubborn, always thought she could fix broken things. His voice was flat, emotionless. She married a man named Daniel Croft. Charming bastard, good with words, bad with whiskey. By the time she realized what he really was, it was too late. "How did you find out?" "Letter from a neighbor 3 months after she died. Said Daniel had gotten drunk, gotten rough, and when Sarah fought back, he'd thrown her down the stairs, broke her neck. Town ruled it an accident because Daniel was well connected and Sarah was just another woman who should have known better than to make her husband angry." Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. "I tracked him for 2 years, Rowan continued. Found him in a saloon in Cheyenne, bragging about his new wife. Young girl, barely 18. I watched him buy her drinks, watched him laugh with his friends, watched him be the same charming man Sarah had fallen for." "What did you do?" "Waited until he left the saloon, followed him into an alley, put my knife in his ribs and watched him bleed out in the dirt." Rowan's voice was completely empty. "Told him Sarah's name right before he died. Wanted him to know why." The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn stared at him, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked genuinely frightened. "You killed him!" "Yes, in cold blood. In justice, there's a difference." "Is there?" Rowan finally looked at her. "I've killed 23 men in my life, 14 during my time as a scout, all in combat, 9 after. 8 were fair fights, men who drew on me first, outlaws who gave me no choice. Daniel Croft was the only one I hunted down and killed deliberately." "And you don't regret it?" "Not even a little." Evelyn pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "That should terrify me." "Probably, but it doesn't, because I understand it." She met his eyes. "If I'd had the chance, I would have killed the men who murdered my father. I would have put a bullet in Silas Granger's head and not lost a moment's sleep over it. But you didn't, because I was too afraid, too weak. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I stopped being fully human somewhere along the way. Don't use me as your measure." They sat together until dawn, neither speaking, both lost in their own dark thoughts. When the sun finally rose, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, Rowan stood and stretched. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll handle the morning work." Evelyn didn't argue. She retreated to her room, but Rowan doubted she'd sleep. Some conversations changed things, and this had been one of them. The next week passed without incident. No more mysterious tracks. No more visitors. Just the endless work of keeping the ranch running through winter. Then, on a gray afternoon in mid-December, a rider appeared on the southern trail. Rowan saw him coming from a mile away. Alone, moving slowly, not trying to hide his approach. That could mean friendly, or it could mean confident. Either way, Rowan grabbed his rifle. The rider was young, maybe 25, with a clean-shaven face and clothes too nice for ranch work. He wore a gun but kept his hands visible as he approached. "Mr. Mercer?" he called out when he was still 30 yards away. "That's close enough. State your business." The rider stopped. "My name's Jacob Barnes. I work for the Territorial Marshal's office. I'm looking for information about a woman named Evelyn Vale." Rowan's blood went cold. "What kind of information?" "The kind that confirms whether she's here or not." "Who's asking?" "A land broker named Silas Granger. He's filed a complaint claiming Miss Vale witnessed a crime and fled before giving testimony. He's hired me to locate her and escort her back to Philadelphia for questioning." Evelyn appeared in the cabin doorway. When she saw the rider, she went rigid. Barnes noticed her immediately. "Miss Vale, I'm going to need you to come with me." "She's not going anywhere," Rowan said. "Sir, I understand you've been sheltering her, but this is official business. If you interfere, I'll have to charge you with obstruction." Rowan raised the rifle slightly. "You can try." Barnes's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. He was young, but not stupid. He'd seen the way Rowan held the rifle, like it was an extension of his body. "Mr. Mercer, I don't want trouble. I'm just doing my job." "Your job is working for a murderer. That's a serious accusation." It's the truth, Evelyn said, stepping out of the cabin. Her voice was shaking but clear. Silas Granger killed my father because he discovered evidence of land fraud. I witnessed the meeting where they discussed it. That's why he wants me back. Not for testimony, but to silence me. Barnes looked between them. Do you have proof? My father's survey documents. Records showing the discrepancies between actual land ownership and what Granger reported to the railroad. I hid them before I ran. Where are they now? Somewhere safe. Somewhere Granger can't get to them. Barnes was quiet for a long moment. Miss Vale, if what you're saying is true, you need to file an official complaint with the marshal. Running makes you look guilty. Filing a complaint makes me dead. Granger has connections everywhere. The local police, the courts, even the railroad executives. My father tried going through proper channels. They killed him for it. Then come back with me. I'll make sure you're protected during the investigation. Protected how? By the same marshals who might already be on Granger's payroll? Barnes flinched. That told Rowan everything he needed to know. The kid wasn't dirty, but he knew his organization might be. I can't force you to come, Barnes said finally, but I can't guarantee Granger won't send someone else, someone less interested in doing this legally. Let him send whoever he wants, Rowan said. They'll leave the same way you're about to, empty-handed. Barnes looked at Rowan for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll tell Granger I couldn't locate you, that the trail went cold in Iron Creek. That should buy you some time. Why would you do that? Evelyn asked. Because I've heard stories about Granger, about the way he operates, and because something about this whole situation doesn't sit right. He gathered his reins. But understand something. If I can find you, so can others, and they won't be as understanding. He turned his horse and rode back the way he'd come. Evelyn watched him go, then turned to Rowan. He's right. If I stay here, I put you in danger. Too late for that. We're already in deep. I should leave, head further west, maybe California. Winter's too harsh for travel. You wouldn't make it 50 miles. Then what do we do? Rowan stared at the horizon where Barnes had disappeared. We prepare. If Granger's determined enough to send one man, he'll send more. Next time, they might not be interested in conversation. That night, Rowan began fortifying the ranch. He reinforced the barn doors, positioned spare rifles near every window, and started stockpiling ammunition. He taught Evelyn how to reload quickly, how to shoot from cover, how to use the terrain to her advantage. You really think it'll come to a fight? She asked during one practice session. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Christmas came and went without celebration. Neither of them was in the mood for festivities, and the looming threat of Granger's men made relaxation impossible. Then, on the last day of December, 3 riders appeared on the northern trail. They weren't trying to be friendly. They rode hard and fast, guns visible, faces hidden beneath heavy scarves. When they were 100 yards out, one of them fired a shot into the air. Rowan grabbed Evelyn and pulled her behind the water trough. Stay down, he ordered. Who are they? Nobody good. The riders stopped 50 yards from the cabin. The leader was a big man with a scarred face and dead eyes. He raised his voice to carry across the snow. Rowan Mercer, we know you got the woman. Send her out and we leave peaceful. Who sent you? Rowan shouted back. That don't matter, just hand her over. Not happening. The leader spat into the snow. Then we take her by force. He signaled to his men. They spread out trying to flank the cabin. Rowan tracked them with his rifle, waiting for a clear shot. One of the riders broke from cover, racing toward the barn. Rowan fired once. The shot caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. He hit the ground hard and didn't get up. The other 2 opened fire. Bullets punched into the cabin walls, shattered windows, tore chunks from the water trough. Evelyn grabbed the spare rifle and fired back. Her first shot went wide, but the second clipped one of the horses, sending it into a panic. The rider fought for control, giving Rowan enough time to line up his shot. The rifle cracked. The rider jerked backward and fell. The leader realized he was now alone. He wheeled his horse around and charged toward the tree line, firing wildly over his shoulder. Rowan tracked him calmly, leading the shot, accounting for distance and wind. He squeezed the trigger. The leader's horse kept running, but the saddle was empty. Silence fell over the valley. Smoke drifted from rifle barrels. Blood stained the snow in 3 separate places. Rowan lowered his rifle and looked at Evelyn. She was shaking, her face pale, but her eyes were clear. Are they dead? She whispered. 2, definitely. Maybe 3. I've never seen anyone die before. Then you're lucky. Most people see it too often. They approached the bodies carefully, rifles ready. The first man was unconscious, bleeding heavily from his shoulder. The second was dead, Rowan's bullet having caught him in the chest. The third, the leader, had taken the shot in the back of his skull. Rowan searched the bodies. No identification, but plenty of money. Professional guns for hire, not local troublemakers. Granger sent them, Evelyn said. Yes. There'll be more, won't there? Yes. She looked at the bodies, then at the blood-stained snow, then at Rowan. What do we do? Rowan reloaded his rifle methodically. We survive. That's all we've ever done. But as he stared at the three dead men, Rowan knew something had changed. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was war. And wars didn't end until one side was completely destroyed. They buried the two dead men in shallow graves beyond the tree line where the ground wasn't completely frozen. The wounded one, the first Rowan had shot, regained consciousness while they were dragging him into the barn. Don't kill me, he gasped, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. Rowan zip-tied his hands to a support beam and stood back. That depends on what you tell me. I don't know anything. I swear. Wrong answer. Rowan pulled his knife and let the firelight catch the blade. Let's try again. Who sent you? The man's eyes went wide. Man named Granger, Silas Granger, paid us $200 each to bring the woman back alive. Alive? Evelyn repeated from the doorway. Why alive? Didn't say, just said no permanent damage. Bruises were fine, broken bones if necessary, but breathing when we delivered her. Rowan crouched down to eye level. Where's Granger now? Don't know. He hired us through a middleman in Cheyenne. We were supposed to meet him in Denver after the job. How many more are coming? I don't... He stopped when Rowan pressed the knife against his throat. 3 more. Another crew. They're supposed to hit you if we didn't report back by tomorrow. When tomorrow? Nightfall. They're camped 20 miles south, waiting for our signal. Rowan stood up and looked at Evelyn. Her face was hard, all traces of the frightened Eastern woman completely gone. What do we do with him? She asked. Give him a choice. Rowan turned back to the wounded man. You can ride out of here tonight with your shoulder bandaged and your life intact. You tell Granger's people I'm dead, the woman escaped into the mountains, and this job is cursed. Or you can stay here and freeze to death tied to that beam. Your decision. I'll go. I'll tell them whatever you want. Smart man. Rowan cut him loose and bandaged the shoulder wound with rough efficiency. But understand something. If I ever see you again, if I even hear your name in connection with Evelyn Vale, I won't shoot you in the shoulder next time. The man nodded frantically. 20 minutes later, he was on his horse, riding south as fast as the animal could manage through the snow. Evelyn watched him disappear into the darkness. You think he'll actually warn the others away? No, but he might make them hesitate. That's all we need. 3 more men coming tomorrow night. We can't fight them all. We're not going to fight them here. She turned to look at him. What do you mean? Rowan was already moving, pulling supplies from the barn. If they're camped 20 miles south, they'll come up the main trail through Black Ridge Canyon. It's the only route that doesn't add an extra day of travel. So that canyon is a natural choke point, steep walls, narrow passage, limited sight lines. If we can get there first, we can turn it into a killing ground. You want to ambush them. I want to end this before it gets worse. Right now, Granger's sending hired guns. They're dangerous but predictable. If we don't stop them here, he'll escalate, send more men, better men, maybe even involve the territorial authorities with false charges. Rowan grabbed his rifle and ammunition. We cut off the head now, or we spend the rest of winter running. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I've never ambushed anyone before. Then tonight's your first time. Get your rifle and warm clothes. We leave in 10 minutes. They rode out under a moonless sky, the darkness so complete that Rowan had to trust his horse to find the trail. Evelyn followed close behind, her breath coming in sharp gasps that had nothing to do with the cold. Black Ridge Canyon was a 3-hour ride south. The trail wound through dense pine forest before opening into the canyon proper, a narrow passage between 2 sheer rock faces that stretched for nearly a mile. During summer, water ran through the canyon floor. In winter, it was just ice and stone. Rowan stopped at the canyon's northern entrance and dismounted. He spent 20 minutes studying the terrain, making calculations, planning angles of fire. "Here's how this works," he said finally. "I'll take position on the west ridge, about halfway through the canyon. You'll be on the east side, 50 yards back. When they enter, they'll be focused on the trail ahead. I'll take the first shot. You wait for my second shot, then open fire on anyone still mounted." "What if I miss?" "Then adjust and shoot again. They'll be trapped between us with nowhere to go but forward or back. Either way, they're exposed. And if they don't come through the canyon, then we wasted a night, but I don't think that's going to happen. Men like this, they take the easy route every time." They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Rowan positioned himself on a rocky outcrop 30 feet above the canyon floor, with clear sight lines in both directions. Evelyn climbed to her position with help, settling behind a fallen tree that provided cover and a stable shooting rest. Then they waited. The cold was brutal. Evelyn's fingers went numb inside her gloves. Her face felt like frozen leather. She'd brought a blanket, but even wrapped tight, the temperature seemed to seep straight into her bones. Across the canyon, she could barely see Rowan. He sat perfectly still, rifle ready, looking more like a part of the landscape than a living person. Hours passed. Evelyn started to wonder if the wounded man had lied, if the others had already turned back, if they were freezing to death for nothing. Then she heard it. Horses. Moving slowly but steadily through the canyon from the south. Her heart started pounding. She gripped the rifle tighter, trying to control her breathing the way Rowan had taught her. 3 riders emerged from the darkness. They moved in single file, guns drawn, scanning the cliffs above. These weren't amateurs. They knew the canyon was dangerous and were prepared for trouble. Rowan let them get halfway through before he fired. The shot echoed off the canyon walls like thunder. The lead rider jerked backward and tumbled from his horse. The animal panicked, crashing into the horse behind it. Rowan's second shot came 3 seconds later. Another rider down. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, to aim, to squeeze the trigger like she'd practiced 100 times. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Her shot went high, sparking off the rock face above the remaining rider's head. The man wheeled his horse around, trying to locate where the shot had come from. Rowan fired again, but the moving target made it difficult. The bullet caught the horse instead. The animal screamed and collapsed, pinning the rider beneath it. Evelyn chambered another round, aimed more carefully, and fired. This time she hit the horse's flank. Not the target she'd intended, but it kept the rider pinned. Rowan scrambled down from his position, moving with surprising speed for a man his size. He approached the trapped rider with his rifle raised. "Don't move," he ordered. The man was struggling to free his leg from beneath the dying horse. He stopped when he saw Rowan's rifle pointed at his face. "Who else is coming?" Rowan demanded. "Nobody. We were the last crew Granger hired." "You're lying." "I swear, just us. The deal was simple. Bring the woman back, collect the rest of our money in Denver. That's all I know." Rowan studied him for a long moment. "You know what Granger wants her for?" "Just heard she witnessed something she shouldn't have. That's all we were told." Evelyn climbed down from her position and approached. The man's eyes widened when he saw her. "You're the one causing all this trouble?" he said. "You don't look like much." "Neither did my father," Evelyn replied coldly. "And look what they did to him." The man's horse finally died, its breathing stopping with a wet rattle. The rider managed to pull his leg free and tried to stand. Rowan kicked his legs out from under him. "Stay down." "What are you going to do? Kill me in cold blood?" "Considering you rode up here planning to kidnap a woman and probably kill me?" "Yes." "I was just doing a job." "So am I." Rowan raised the rifle. The man's face went white. "Wait," Evelyn said. Rowan paused but didn't lower the weapon. "Why?" "Because killing him makes us exactly what Granger claims we are. He's a witness to what happened here. So let him witness. Let him go back to Granger and tell him what happens to people who come after us." The trapped man looked between them, barely breathing. Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then he lowered the rifle slightly. "You get one chance. You ride back to whoever's paying you and you tell them that Evelyn Vale is under my protection. Tell them the next crew that comes up here won't get the option to leave. Understand?" The man nodded frantically. "And if I ever see your face again, anywhere, anytime, I'll put a bullet in it before you can speak. That clear?" "Yes, crystal clear." Rowan stepped back. The man scrambled to his feet, grabbed the reins of one of the riderless horses, and mounted up. He looked at the two bodies lying in the snow, then at Rowan and Evelyn. "You two are either the bravest or the stupidest people I've ever met," he said. "Probably both," Rowan replied. The man rode south without another word. Evelyn watched him go, then looked at the bodies. "We should bury them." "No time. Storm's coming in." Rowan pointed at the northern sky where dark clouds were building. "We need to get back to the ranch before it hits." They rode hard through the darkness. The storm caught them 2 miles from home, wind and snow so thick they could barely see their horses' heads. Rowan navigated by memory and instinct, Evelyn following close behind, both of them half frozen by the time they reached the cabin. Inside, Rowan built the fire back up while Evelyn stripped off her wet outer layers. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't work the buttons. "Here." Rowan helped her with the coat, his own hand steady despite the cold. "Get close to the fire before you lose any fingers." She sat near the flames, teeth chattering. "I killed someone tonight. Shot them." "You shot a horse." "I was aiming for the rider." "Still counts as trying." Rowan poured coffee that was hours old and bitter as hell. "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. Empty, maybe. I thought I'd feel guilty or scared or something, but I just feel nothing." "That's normal. The feelings come later, usually when you least expect them." "Does it get easier?" "No. You just get better at living with it." They sat in silence, warming themselves by the fire. Outside, the storm raged with a fury that suggested it would last days. "We can't keep doing this," Evelyn said eventually. "Fighting off whoever Granger sends. Sooner or later, we'll lose." "I know." "Then what do we do?" Rowan stared into the flames. "We take the fight to him." She looked up sharply. "What?" "Granger's in Denver, right? That's where the wounded man said they were supposed to meet him." "You want to go to Denver? In the middle of winter?" "I want to end this. As long as Granger's alive and hunting you, we'll never have peace. We'll spend every day waiting for the next attack, watching the horizon for riders, sleeping with rifles in our hands. Even if we could reach Denver, even if we could find him, what then? Kill him? If necessary. That's murder. That's justice. Same as with Daniel Croft." Evelyn shook her head. "This is different. Croft killed your sister directly. Granger hired men to kill my father. There's legal separation there, plausible deniability. Legal separation doesn't make him less guilty." "Maybe not, but it makes killing him less justifiable." Rowan turned to look at her. "You want to spend the rest of your life running, looking over your shoulder, never knowing when the next attack is coming?" "No, but I also don't want to become a murderer." "You already tried to kill a man tonight. In self-defense, that's completely different from hunting someone down." "Is it?" Rowan's voice was harsh. "You think those men we killed tonight were evil? They were just hired guns doing a job. Granger's the one who pointed them at us. He's the one with blood on his hands. And he'll keep sending more until either we're dead or he is." Evelyn stood up, pacing. "There has to be another way. The documents my father had, the evidence of Granger's fraud. If we could get those to the right authorities..." "What authorities? You said yourself Granger has connections everywhere. Who do you trust not to be on his payroll?" "I don't know, but there has to be someone. A federal marshal, maybe, or a territorial judge, or... And how long do you think we'd survive while trying to find this mythical, honest official? How many more attacks can we fight off?" She stopped pacing and faced him. "I understand what you're saying, I do. But if we kill Granger, we become exactly what he's been claiming we are, criminals running from justice. We're already criminals in his version of events. Might as well make it count." "No," her voice was firm. "I won't do it. I won't let what happened to my father turn me into a killer." "You already are a killer. You pulled that trigger tonight, same as me." "That was different, and you know it." The argument hung in the air between them. Outside, the storm howled like a living thing. Rowan finally looked away. "Fine. We'll try it your way. But when it doesn't work, and it won't, don't expect me to stand by and watch you die." He grabbed his coat and rifle and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Evelyn demanded. "To check the barn. Make sure the storm hasn't torn anything apart. In this weather, you'll freeze to death. Then at least I'll die doing something useful instead of arguing about morality with someone who doesn't understand how the real world works." He slammed the door behind him. Evelyn stood there, anger and frustration warring inside her. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand that there had to be a better way than just killing everyone who got in their path. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe Rowan was right. Maybe there was no other way. Maybe the frontier didn't allow for moral complexity, for legal nuance, for anything except survival at any cost. She hated that voice, but she couldn't silence it. When Rowan came back 20 minutes later, half frozen and covered in snow, they didn't speak. They prepared a silent dinner, ate in separate parts of the cabin, and went to their rooms without saying goodnight. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of forced proximity and stubborn silence. They worked side by side, feeding livestock, hauling water, chopping wood, but neither spoke beyond what was absolutely necessary. On the 4th day, the storm broke. Weak sunlight filtered through thinning clouds, and the wind finally died down. Rowan was outside chopping wood when he saw riders approaching from the west. 4 of them this time, moving fast. "Evelyn," he shouted, "get the rifles." She appeared in the doorway, saw the riders, and ducked back inside. She emerged seconds later with both rifles loaded and ready. The riders stopped 100 yards out. One of them raised a white flag, an actual piece of white cloth tied to a stick. "That's new," Rowan muttered. "What does it mean?" Evelyn asked. "Either they want to talk or it's a trick." The rider with the flag nudged his horse forward, hands clearly visible and away from his weapons. "Rowan Mercer," he called out. "My name is Coleman Reed. I'm here on behalf of the Territorial Marshal. I'm not armed, and I'm requesting a conversation." Rowan kept his rifle raised. "About what?" "About the bodies in Black Ridge Canyon and the accusations being made against you and Miss Vale." Evelyn's face went pale. "They found the bodies." "Was bound to happen eventually," Rowan said. Then, louder, "Come forward alone. Your friends stay where they are." Reed dismounted and walked forward slowly, hands raised. He was middle-aged, with gray in his beard and the kind of face that had seen too much to be easily shocked. When he was 20 feet away, Rowan said, "That's close enough." Reed stopped. "May I lower my hands? This is damn uncomfortable." "Keep them where I can see them." Reed sighed, but complied. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to be direct with you. 3 days ago, a rancher found 2 bodies in Black Ridge Canyon, both shot dead. A wounded man matching the description of one of Granger's hired guns showed up in Iron Creek claiming you ambushed them without provocation." "That's a lie," Evelyn said. "I'm sure it is, miss. But it's a lie that's being told to a lot of people right now. Granger's using it to paint you both as dangerous criminals who need to be brought in." "So you're here to arrest us?" Rowan asked. "I'm here to offer you a choice." Reed shifted his weight. "You can come with me peacefully to Denver for questioning. You'll have a chance to tell your side of the story, present any evidence you have, and face Granger in front of a territorial judge. Or you stay here, and within a week, there'll be a dozen marshals and 50 deputized men surrounding this ranch. They'll burn you out if they have to, and Granger will make sure that's exactly what happens." Rowan and Evelyn exchanged glances. "Why should we trust you?" she asked. "Because I've been investigating Silas Granger for the past 6 months, Reed said. "And everything you've probably told Mercer about land fraud, falsified documents, and murder? I believe it. But I need proof. The kind that holds up in court. The kind that can't be dismissed or buried." "The documents," Evelyn breathed. "My father's survey records. If you have them, and if they show what I think they show, then we can take Granger down legally. No more running, no more gunfights, just justice." Rowan lowered his rifle slightly. "And if we go with you, and it's a trap? Then you're no worse off than you are now. But at least you'll have tried." Reed looked between them. "I'm not saying trust me blindly. I'm saying trust that I want Granger in prison as much as you do. Maybe for different reasons, but the goal's the same." The silence stretched out. Behind Reed, his 3 companions sat motionless on their horses, making no threatening moves. "Give us a minute," Rowan said. He pulled Evelyn back toward the cabin, out of earshot. "What do you think?" she whispered. "I think it's 50-50 whether he's telling the truth. Those aren't good odds. They're better than the alternative. He's right about one thing. If we stay here, they'll come in force. We can fight off 3 or 4 men. We can't fight 50. Evelyn bit her lip. "The documents are in Philadelphia, in a safe deposit box at the First National Bank. I'm the only one who can access them." Then we need to get to Philadelphia. That's a 2-week journey by train. Granger will have people watching every station between here and there. Probably, but if Reed's legitimate, he can provide protection during the trip. And if he's not, Rowan looked at her steadily. Then we'll be dead by the time we reach Cheyenne, and none of this will matter anyway. She took a deep breath. This is insane. Welcome to the frontier. They walked back to where Reed waited. All right, Evelyn said. I'll go with you to Denver and then to Philadelphia to retrieve the documents. But I have conditions. Name them. Rowan comes with us. If I'm walking into what might be a trap, I want someone I trust watching my back. Reed nodded. Agreed. And if at any point I feel like this is going sideways, we're gone. No arguments, no attempts to stop us. Can't promise that. If you run, it looks like guilt. Take it or leave it, Rowan said flatly. Reed was quiet for a moment. Fine. But understand, if you run, I will come after you. Not because I want to, but because it's my job. Fair enough, Evelyn said. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. Pack light. We'll be moving fast. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Rowan arranged for Tom, the neighboring rancher, to look after the livestock while they were gone. He packed ammunition, supplies, and enough money to survive for a month if things went wrong. Evelyn packed her few belongings and tried not to think about the fact that she might never see this cabin again. Despite everything, the hardship, the danger, the isolation, it had become something like home. That night, they sat by the fire one last time. You don't have to come with me, Evelyn said. This is my fight, not yours. We've been through this. I know, but she struggled to find the words. You've already done more than anyone had a right to expect. You took me in when nobody else would. You protected me. You taught me to survive. You don't owe me anything more. Rowan stared into the flames. My sister died because I wasn't there. Because I was off doing my job, following orders, trusting that the world would keep turning without me watching over her. I swore I'd never make that mistake again. I'm not your sister. No. But you're someone who needed help, and I gave it. That makes you my responsibility. That's not how responsibility works. It's how mine works. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Evelyn said quietly, Thank you. For everything. Rowan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The next morning, they rode out with Reed and his men. The journey to Denver took 4 days of hard riding. Reed kept them moving fast, avoiding main roads, staying in small towns where Granger's influence was minimal. Denver was bigger than Evelyn had imagined, a sprawling city full of railroad workers, miners, merchants, and the kind of people who came west looking for fortune and found mostly dirt. Reed brought them to a modest hotel near the territorial courthouse and posted guards outside their rooms. We're meeting with Judge Harrison tomorrow, he explained. He's one of the few officials I trust not to be in Granger's pocket. You'll need to tell him everything, about your father, about the land fraud, about the attacks on the ranch. Will Granger be there? Evelyn asked. Probably. He has the right to face his accuser. And if he tries something, then I'll arrest him on the spot. Reed looked at her seriously. But understand, he's not going to confess. He's going to deny everything and paint you as a liar. That's why we need those documents. That night, Evelyn barely slept. She kept imagining the courtroom, facing Granger across an open space, watching him lie about her father while she stood powerless to do anything except tell the truth. Rowan sat in a chair by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the street below. You should sleep, Evelyn said. Can't. Too keyed up. Nervous? Cautious. Something about this doesn't sit right. Reed seems honest enough. Seems and is are different things. Rowan shifted in the chair. I've seen men put on good faces before. They smile and shake your hand right before they stab you in the back. You think Reed's lying? I think everyone's lying about something. Question is whether his lies are dangerous to us. Morning came too quickly. Reed arrived at dawn with 2 marshals as escorts. They walked through Denver's streets toward the courthouse, drawing stares from early risers. The courthouse was an impressive building, 2 stories of stone and timber with the territorial seal carved above the entrance. Inside, it smelled like leather, paper, and old wood. Judge Harrison's chambers were on the 2nd floor. He was an elderly man with sharp eyes and a manner that suggested he'd heard every lie ever told and believed none of them. "Miss Vale," he said when they entered. "Mr. Mercer, please sit." They sat. Reed stood by the door. "Now," Harrison said, folding his hands on his desk. "Marshal Reed has made some serious allegations. He claims you witnessed evidence of systematic land fraud perpetrated by Mr. Silas Granger and his associates. Is this correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Evelyn said. "And your father, deceased, I understand, he was the original source of this evidence?" "Yes. He was a surveyor. He discovered discrepancies between actual property boundaries and the deeds Granger was filing with the railroad. And you have physical proof of these discrepancies?" "In Philadelphia. Survey documents, property records, correspondence between Granger and railroad officials. Everything my father collected before they killed him." Harrison's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation, Miss Vale. Murder." "It's the truth. Truth and proof are not the same thing." "Which is why we need to get to Philadelphia," Reed interjected. Harrison nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll authorize a mom." The door opened. A man walked in without knocking, tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested wealth and power. Silas Granger. Evelyn's breath caught. She hadn't seen him since the night she fled Philadelphia, and the sight of him now brought everything rushing back. Her father's funeral, Granger's threats, the bruises on her wrists. "Your Honor," Granger said smoothly, "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I have a right to be present when accusations are being made against me." Harrison frowned. "Mr. Granger, this is a preliminary hearing, not a trial." "Nevertheless, I'm here now." Granger's eyes found Evelyn. "Hello, Miss Vale. It's been quite some time." Rowan stood up immediately, positioning himself between Granger and Evelyn. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer," Harrison ordered. "This is a court of law, not a saloon." Rowan sat but kept his hand near his knife. Granger smiled. "I understand Miss Vale has been making some rather wild claims about me. Land fraud, murder. It's quite creative, really." "It's the truth," Evelyn said, her voice shaking with anger. "The truth? The truth is that your father was a troubled man who made mistakes in his survey work and couldn't face the consequences. When I tried to help him correct those mistakes, he became paranoid, irrational. His death was tragic, but it was an accident, nothing more." "You're lying." "Am I? Then where's your proof? Where are these mysterious documents that supposedly incriminate me?" "In Philadelphia, and we're going to retrieve them." Granger's smile widened. "How unfortunate. Because I have documents of my own. Right here, in fact." He pulled a folder from his coat and handed it to Harrison. The judge opened it, read quickly, and his expression darkened. "What is this?" Reed demanded. "Arrest warrants," Harrison said quietly, "for both Evelyn Vale and Rowan Mercer, signed by a judge in Cheyenne, charging them with multiple counts of murder in connection with the deaths in Black Ridge Canyon." The room went silent. "That's impossible," Reed said. "Those men attacked them. It was self-defense." "According to whose testimony?" Granger asked. "The only witnesses are the two people standing in this room who benefited from those deaths. The survivor's testimony paints a very different picture. An unprovoked ambush, cold-blooded murder." "He's lying," Evelyn stood up. "Those men were hired by you to kidnap me." "Prove it." She couldn't. She had nothing except her word against his. Harrison looked at the warrants, then at Reed. "Marshal, I'm sorry, but these are legitimate, issued by a judge with proper jurisdiction. I have no choice but to honor them." "Your Honor, please. I said I have no choice." Harrison stood up. "Evelyn Vale, Rowan Mercer, you're both under arrest for murder. You'll be transported to Cheyenne to stand trial." Rowan's hand moved toward his knife, but Reed caught his arm. "Don't," Reed whispered urgently. "You pull a weapon in here, you'll be dead before you hit the floor." Granger was still smiling. "Justice will be served, Your Honor. Finally." As marshals moved in to restrain them, Evelyn looked at Rowan and saw in his eyes exactly what she was thinking. They'd walked straight into a trap. The jail cell in Denver smelled like unwashed bodies, stale tobacco, and despair. Rowan sat on the narrow cot, back against the stone wall, watching the barred window where weak afternoon light filtered through. Evelyn paced in the adjacent cell, her footsteps echoing off the walls. "We should have run," she said for the 5th time in as many hours. "When we had the chance, we should have disappeared into the mountains. And freeze to death before January?" Rowan didn't take his eyes off the window. "Or starve when the supplies ran out? Better than hanging." "We're not going to hang." "How can you be so calm?" She stopped pacing and gripped the bars between their cells. "Granger has us exactly where he wants us. He's probably already bought off the judge in Cheyenne. We're going to be convicted of murder, and there's nothing we can do about it." Rowan finally looked at her. "You done panicking?" "I'm not panicking. I'm being realistic." Realistic is understanding the situation. Panicking is deciding it's hopeless before we've tried anything. What is there to try? We're locked in a cell with armed guards outside. For now. Rowan stood up and moved to his own cell door, examining the lock mechanism. Reed's not stupid. He knows Granger played him. Question is whether his pride is wounded enough to do something about it. As if summoned by the mention of his name, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Coleman Reed appeared, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The guard unlocked the outer door and let him through, then retreated to give them privacy. "You two doing all right?" Reed asked. "Wonderful," Rowan said flatly. "Nothing like being arrested for defending yourself against hired killers." Reed winced. "I know. I'm sorry. I walked you straight into it." "Sorry doesn't get us out of here." "No, but evidence might." Reed pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I've been doing some digging into that warrant. The judge who signed it, Nelson Cooper in Cheyenne, he's been on the bench for 2 years. Know how he got the appointment?" "Let me guess," Evelyn said. "Granger?" "Close. Railroad money. Same difference." Reed unfolded the paper. Cooper signed off on 17 land seizures in the past 18 months, all of them benefiting railroad expansion, all of them filed by Granger. So he's corrupt. We already knew that. Yes, but now I have proof of the connection. And more importantly, I found something interesting about the witness testimony used to get the warrant issued. Reed looked at Evelyn. "The survivor from Black Ridge Canyon, the man who claimed you ambushed them without provocation, his name is Martin Kelly. Former railroad security. Worked directly for Granger until last year when he was fired for excessive violence against homesteaders." "So the witness is biased," Rowan said. "That doesn't invalidate his testimony in court." "No, but this might." Reed produced another document. Kelly was arrested in Cheyenne 2 days ago for assault and robbery. He's sitting in a cell 3 blocks from here, and according to the arresting officer's report, Kelly was carrying $500 in fresh banknotes when they picked him up. Evelyn's eyes widened. Payment for testimony. "That's my theory, but I need to prove it, and to do that, I need Kelly to talk." Reed looked at them seriously. "Which is why I need your help." "Our help?" Rowan raised an eyebrow. "In case you forgot, we're the ones in jail. For now. But there's a loophole in territorial law. If you agree to assist in an active investigation, I can temporarily release you into my custody. It's meant for situations where a prisoner has information about other crimes. We don't have information about Kelly." "No, but you know what questions to ask? You know Granger's operation better than anyone, and Kelly might be more willing to talk to fellow prisoners than to a marshal." Rowan studied Reed carefully. "You're asking us to trust you again, after you delivered us straight to Granger." "I know. And I wouldn't blame you for telling me to go to hell. But this is the only play we have. If Kelly admits he was paid to lie, the warrant gets thrown out. Without the warrant, Granger loses his legal cover. We can force him into the open. And if Kelly doesn't talk? Then you go back in the cell, and we wait for the trial in Cheyenne, which, based on what I know about Judge Cooper, will not end well for you." The silence stretched out. Rowan looked at Evelyn, who nodded slightly. "All right," Rowan said, "but if this is another trap, it's not. You have my word." "Your word didn't mean much this morning." Reed's jaw tightened. "This morning I was following proper legal procedure. I thought the system would work. I was wrong, but I'm done playing by Granger's rules." 20 minutes later, they were being escorted through Denver's streets toward a different jail facility. Reed had 4 armed deputies with them. Whether for protection or to prevent escape, Rowan couldn't tell. The building where Kelly was being held was older and grimier than the main jail. The guard barely glanced at Reed's credentials before waving them through. Kelly was in a cell by himself, nursing a black eye and split lip. He looked up when they approached, and his face went pale. "You," he breathed, staring at Rowan. "Me," Rowan confirmed. "Surprised to see us." "You're supposed to be—" Kelly stopped himself. "Supposed to be what? Dead? Hanging? Already convicted?" Rowan leaned against the bars. "Funny thing about plans, they don't always work out the way you expect." Reed unlocked the cell door. "Mr. Kelly, these individuals are assisting me with an investigation. They'd like to ask you some questions." "I got nothing to say to them." "That's unfortunate." Reed stepped aside, letting Rowan enter the cell. "Because they have quite a bit to say to you." Rowan moved into the small space with the kind of casual menace he'd perfected over 15 years of frontier living. Kelly tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. "Easy now," Kelly said, raising his hands. "I'm in custody. You can't touch me." "Can I?" Rowan glanced at Reed. "Marshal, you seen me touch him?" "My view's a little obstructed from here," Reed said. Kelly's eyes darted between them. "This is illegal." "So is perjury. So is accepting bribes to give false testimony. So is attempted kidnapping." Rowan crouched down to Kelly's eye level. "Want to compare which crimes carry harsher sentences?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The $500 they found on you, where'd that come from?" "Gambling winnings." "Really? What game?" Kelly hesitated. "Poker." "Where?" "The Silver Dollar Saloon." "Which is closed for renovations and has been for 2 weeks," Reed interjected. "Try again." Sweat was beading on Kelly's forehead. "Maybe it was a different place. I don't remember." Rowan grabbed Kelly by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the wall. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but hard enough to make a point. "Here's what's going to happen," Rowan said quietly. "You're going to tell us the truth about who paid you and why. And if you lie, if you hesitate, if you give me any reason to think you're protecting the man who's trying to have us hanged, I'm going to make you regret every decision you've made since the day you were born." "You're crazy." "I've been called worse." Rowan tightened his grip. "Talk." "I can't. They'll kill me." "I'll kill you right now if you don't." Kelly looked at Reed desperately. "You can't let him do this." Reed studied his fingernails. "I'm not seeing anything illegal happening. Maybe I should step outside for some fresh air." "No, wait!" Kelly was breathing hard now, panic overtaking whatever loyalty he'd had. Okay. Granger paid me. He paid me to testify that you ambushed us. Said if I didn't, he'd make sure I hung alongside his other men." "How much?" $500 up front, another $500 after the trial." "Who else did he pay?" "The judge, the clerk?" "I don't know about Cooper, but yeah, he's got people in Cheyenne, railroad executives, territorial officials, even some of the federal marshals." Rowan released him and stepped back. "You're going to repeat all of that to Judge Harrison. If I do, I'm a dead man. If you don't, you're a convicted criminal facing years in prison for assault and perjury. Pick your poison." Kelly slumped against the wall, all the fight draining out of him. "You don't understand what Granger's capable of. He's got reach everywhere. Money, connections, people who owe him favors. Even if I testify, even if the warrant gets thrown out, he'll just come at you another way." "Let us worry about that," Evelyn said from outside the cell. It was the first time she'd spoken since they arrived. "Right now, we need you to do the right thing." Kelly laughed bitterly. "The right thing? That's rich coming from people who shot 3 men dead. 3 men who were trying to kidnap me on Granger's orders," she replied coldly. 3 men who would have killed Rowan and dragged me back to Philadelphia to be silenced. Don't pretend you were innocent victims." Kelly didn't have an answer for that. Reed stepped forward. "Mr. Kelly, you have a choice. Cooperate with us. Testify honestly about who paid you and why, and I'll recommend leniency on the assault charges. Or refuse, and I'll make sure you face the maximum sentence for everything we can prove, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder." "Some choice?" "It's more than Granger gave you." Kelly was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. I'll testify. But you have to protect me. If Granger finds out I turned, you'll be in protective custody until the hearing," Reed assured him. "And after that, I'll arrange transport out of the territory if you want it." "Yeah, I want it." They left Kelly in his cell and returned to the street. The sun was setting, painting Denver's skyline in shades of orange and purple. Rowan took a deep breath of free air, knowing it might be temporary. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked. "Now I file a motion with Judge Harrison to dismiss the warrant based on false testimony," Reed said. "With Kelly willing to admit he was paid to lie, Harrison will have no choice but to throw it out." And then the real fight starts. Without the legal cover of the arrest warrant, Granger's going to get desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. "Or they get more dangerous," Rowan said. "That too." Reed escorted them back to the hotel. A different one this time, smaller and less conspicuous. He posted guards outside again, but these were men he personally trusted, deputies who'd worked with him for years. "Stay inside tonight," he instructed. "Don't open the door for anyone except me. I'll have food sent up." After he left, Rowan checked every window, every lock, every possible entry point. Evelyn watched him work, recognizing the ritual for what it was, a way to feel some measure of control when everything else was chaos. "Do you think Kelly will actually testify?" she asked. "He's scared enough. Question is whether Granger will get to him first." Reed said protective custody. "Reed also said we'd get a fair hearing this morning. Look how that turned out." Evelyn sat on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "I keep thinking about the ranch, about whether we'll ever see it again." "We will." "You sound certain." "I am, because the alternative is unacceptable." She looked at him. "You really think we can beat Granger? A man with that much money and power?" "I've beaten worse odds." "When?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Winter of '81. I was scouting for a cavalry unit that got separated from the main column during a blizzard. 20 soldiers lost in hostile territory, surrounded by a war party 5 times our size. Everyone said we were dead. The lieutenant even wrote farewell letters to his family." "What happened?" "We survived. Not because we were stronger or better armed or luckier. We survived because we refused to accept that we were going to die. We fought for every inch, every hour, every breath. And when the storm cleared and reinforcements arrived, we were still standing." "How many did you lose?" 6. But 14 lived. In that situation, with those odds, that counted as a victory. Evelyn absorbed that. "You're saying some of us might not make it through this." "I'm saying we fight anyway, because the alternative is lying down and letting Granger win. And I'm not going to do that." She nodded slowly. "Neither am I." The food arrived an hour later, beef stew and bread brought up by one of Reed's trusted deputies. They ate in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. As night fell over Denver, Rowan took the first watch again. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the street below for any sign of trouble. Around midnight, Evelyn woke from restless sleep and found him still sitting there. "You need to rest," she said. "I'll rest when this is over." "Rowan, you're going to collapse if you don't sleep." "I've gone longer without sleep. During the war, we once stayed up for 72 hours straight tracking a raiding party. This is nothing." She moved to sit beside him, looking out at the quiet street. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to anyway." "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's because of your sister. There's more to it than that." Rowan was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "After Sarah died, after I killed Croft, I swore I was done. Done with people, done with caring, done with getting involved in things that weren't my business. I figured the safest way to live was to not let anyone matter." But then you stepped off that train, and I saw those bruises, and I remembered what it felt like to be too late, to arrive after the damage was already done. And I thought maybe, just maybe, this time I could be there when it counted. You were. You are. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, I've done a pretty poor job of protecting you. We're wanted for murder. We're trapped in a city controlled by the man trying to kill you, and our best hope is a marshal who already led us into one trap. That's not your fault, isn't it? I could have turned you away in Iron Creek, could have let the sheriff send you back east, could have stayed out of it entirely, and I would be dead. Granger's men would have found me within a week. At least this way I've had a chance to fight back. She reached out and put her hand on his arm. You saved my life, Rowan. Whatever happens next, that doesn't change. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. In the dim light from the street lamps below, she looked different from the frightened woman who'd arrived at his ranch. Harder, stronger, more dangerous. "You've changed," he said. "So have you." "How so?" "When I first met you, you acted like you didn't care about anything or anyone, like the whole world could burn and you wouldn't blink. But that was a lie, wasn't it?" "Was it?" "You cared enough to help me, cared enough to teach me to survive, cared enough to risk your life fighting off Granger's men." She squeezed his arm. "You pretend to be this cold, distant person who's given up on humanity, but you're not. You're just someone who's been hurt so many times that you forgot how to let people in." Rowan pulled his arm away. "You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I?" "No." "You think you figured me out after a few months? You think you understand what I've lived through, what I've done, the things that keep me awake at night? Then tell me. Why? So you can feel sorry for me? So you can try to fix me like you probably tried to fix those children you taught back east? That's not what I don't need fixing, Evelyn. I don't need understanding or sympathy or whatever it is you think you're offering. I need you to focus on staying alive long enough to testify against Granger." The words came out harsher than he'd intended. He saw her flinch, saw the hurt flash across her face before she buried it. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have presumed." She stood up and walked back to the bed, lying down with her back to him. Rowan sat there, staring out the window, hating himself for pushing her away. She'd been right about everything. He did care. He was just too broken to know how to show it without it feeling like weakness. But admitting that would mean tearing down walls he'd spent 15 years building, and he didn't know if there would be anything left of him if those walls came down. So he kept watch in silence and tried not to think about the look on her face when he'd shut her down. Morning came with bad news. Reed arrived at dawn looking like he'd been awake all night. "Kelly's dead," he said without preamble. Rowan was on his feet instantly. "How?" "Someone got to him in his cell. Slit his throat during the night. Guard on duty claims he didn't see or hear anything." "Which means the guard was paid off," Evelyn said. "Probably. I've got him in custody, but he's not talking." Reed ran a hand through his hair. "Without Kelly's testimony, I can't prove the warrant was obtained through false statements. Harrison won't dismiss it without evidence." "So we're back where we started," Rowan said. "Worse than where we started. Granger knows we were close to exposing him. He'll be more careful now, more ruthless." "What are our options?" Reed was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, running. Getting out of Denver tonight. Heading west or north, disappearing into territory where Granger's reach doesn't extend." "We tried hiding," Evelyn said. "It didn't work." "Then I'm out of ideas. Without Kelly, without the documents from Philadelphia, we have nothing solid enough to take to a judge who isn't in Granger's pocket." "What about you?" Rowan asked. "You're a territorial marshal. You have authority to investigate, to build a case." "I do, but cases take time, and Granger's not going to give us time. That warrant's still active. I can delay enforcing it for maybe another day or two before someone starts asking questions. After that, I'll have no choice but to turn you over for transport to Cheyenne." "Where Judge Cooper will make sure we hang," Evelyn said. "Yes." The three of them stood in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down like a physical thing. Finally, Rowan said, "There's one option we haven't discussed." Reed looked at him. "What's that?" "We force Granger's hand, make him come to us on our terms instead of his." "How?" "We let it be known that Evelyn's going to Philadelphia to retrieve the documents. We make sure Granger hears about it. Then we set a trap." "That's suicide, Evelyn said. "Granger will send an army after us." "Maybe. Or maybe he'll come himself. He's arrogant enough. And if we can capture him, force him to confess. Confessions obtained under duress aren't admissible in court," Reed said. "I'm not talking about court. I'm talking about leverage. We get Granger, we have bargaining power. His life in exchange for clearing our names and leaving us alone." Reed shook his head. "That's not justice. That's vigilantism. Justice is what got us arrested on false charges. Justice is what got Kelly killed in his cell. Justice is what's going to get us hanged if we keep playing by rules that Granger's already bought and paid for." Rowan's voice was hard. "I'm done with justice. I want survival." "Rowan," Evelyn started. "No. We've tried it your way. Legal channels, proper procedure, trusting the system. Where did it get us? Kelly's dead, we're still wanted for murder, and Granger's probably celebrating right now. He turned to Reed. You want to help us? Then help us do this. Otherwise, get out of our way. Reed studied him for a long moment. You're talking about kidnapping at minimum. Probably torture, maybe murder. I'm talking about evening the odds. By becoming everything Granger says you are, if that's what it takes. Evelyn stepped between them. Stop, both of you. She looked at Rowan. You're scared, I understand that. We're backed into a corner with no good options, but this isn't the answer. Then what is? We go to Philadelphia like we planned. We get the documents. We find someone, anyone, in the federal system who isn't corrupt, and we present the evidence. If we have to go over every territorial official's head, all the way to Washington if necessary, we do it. That could take months. We don't have months. Then we make the time. We run. We hide. We fight off whoever Granger sends, but we do it while building a legitimate case, not by kidnapping and torturing him. Why? Rowan demanded. Why does it matter how we stop him as long as he's stopped? Because if we become what he is, then we've already lost. We become proof that he was right about us all along. Dangerous, violent criminals who deserve to hang. I don't care what he thinks. I do. And I care what happens to you after this is over. If we cross that line, if we become killers and kidnappers and torturers, we can never come back from it. You'll never be able to return to that ranch. You'll never have peace. You'll spend the rest of your life running and looking over your shoulder. I already do that. No, you hide. You isolate yourself because you're afraid of losing people again. But that's not the same as being hunted. That's not the same as knowing you're guilty of the crimes they're accusing you of. Rowan turned away from her. You don't understand. Then help me understand, what is it you're really afraid of? I'm afraid I'm going to watch you die and not be able to stop it. The words came out louder than he'd intended, raw and painful. I'm afraid that all of this, everything I've done to keep you safe, is going to mean nothing when Granger finally gets his hands on you. And I'm afraid that if I have the chance to prevent that by doing something terrible, I won't be strong enough to walk away. The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn's expression softened. Rowan, no. Don't. He moved to the window, putting distance between them. Don't tell me it's going to be all right. Don't tell me we'll figure something out. Just don't. She wanted to go to him, to say something that would make the pain in his voice go away, but she knew he'd just push her away again. Reed cleared his throat. I'll give you two some time. I need to check in at the office anyway, but we need to make a decision soon, by tonight at the latest. After he left, Evelyn and Rowan stood in silence on opposite sides of the room. Outside, Denver was waking up. Voices in the street, wagons rattling past, the sound of a city that had no idea two people inside this hotel were deciding between justice and vengeance. I meant what I said last night, Evelyn said finally, about you caring more than you pretend to, about you not being as cold as you think you are. And I meant what I said. You don't know me. Maybe not. But I know what I see. And I see someone who's terrified of losing another person he cares about. Someone who's convinced that the only way to protect people is to keep them at a distance. It's worked so far. Has it? Because from where I'm standing, you look pretty miserable. Rowan almost smiled at that. Almost. What do you want from me, Evelyn? I want you to trust that we can do this the right way. That we don't have to become monsters to defeat one. And if the right way gets you killed, then at least I'll die knowing I didn't compromise who I am. Can you say the same about your plan? He couldn't, and they both knew it. Finally, he turned to face her. All right, we'll try it your way, one more time. But if it goes wrong, if Granger gets anywhere near you, all bets are off. Fair enough? And we're going to need a better plan than just hoping we can outrun him to Philadelphia. Then let's make one. They spent the rest of the morning planning. When Reed returned that afternoon, they presented their idea. We don't run from Granger, Evelyn explained. We give him exactly what he wants. Me, apparently vulnerable, traveling to Philadelphia to retrieve the documents. That's insane, Reed said immediately. Let her finish, Rowan said. Granger will send people after me, probably his best people, since he can't afford to let me reach Philadelphia alive. But what he won't expect is for me to be ready for them. And he definitely won't expect me to lead them into a trap. Reed frowned. What kind of trap? The kind where we capture at least one of his men alive, get them to talk about who hired them and why, and use that testimony to build a case that even a corrupt judge can't ignore. That's still dangerous as hell. Less dangerous than sitting here waiting for the warrant to be enforced, Rowan said. At least this way we're taking action instead of reacting. And if his men don't talk, then we adapt. But we're not going to win this by hiding. We're going to win by being smarter, faster, and more prepared than Granger expects. Reed looked between them, seeing the determination in both their faces. You two are either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Evelyn said. All right, I'll help you. But we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks, no cowboy heroics. Agreed? Agreed, they said in unison. That night, Reed made it known through carefully selected channels that Evelyn Vale would be leaving for Philadelphia in 2 days, traveling by train with minimal security. The bait was set. Now all they had to do was wait for Granger to bite, and hope they were ready when he did. The train to Cheyenne left at dawn, cutting through frozen landscape under a sky the color of steel. Evelyn sat in the passenger car, dressed plainly, looking like just another traveler heading east. To anyone watching, she appeared alone and vulnerable. But Rowan was 2 cars back, concealed among freight crates with a clear view of anyone who approached her compartment. Reed and 3 trusted deputies were scattered throughout the train, dressed as civilians, weapons hidden but ready. The first 6 hours passed without incident. Evelyn read a book she wasn't absorbing, watching the countryside roll past while her heart hammered against her ribs. Every passenger who walked through the car made her tense. Every stop at a small station made her wonder if this was when Granger's men would board. It wasn't until they pulled into a depot outside Greeley that things went wrong. 3 men boarded during the stop, moving with the kind of purposeful coordination that marked them as professionals. They split up immediately, one heading toward Evelyn's car, 2 moving toward the back of the train. Rowan saw them coming. He caught Reed's eye 3 cars away and gave a subtle hand signal. Reed nodded and started moving. The man approaching Evelyn's car was tall and lean, dressed like a rancher but moving like a predator. He walked past her once, studying her with cold calculation, then turned back. "Miss Vale?" he said quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. Evelyn's hand moved toward the derringer hidden in her coat pocket. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "I don't think so. Mr. Granger sends his regards." "I don't know any Mr. Granger." The man smiled without warmth. "You can make this easy or difficult. Either way, you're getting off this train at the next stop. And if I refuse? Then I'll drag you off. Your choice." Before Evelyn could respond, Rowan appeared behind the man, pressing a knife against his back just hard enough to be felt through the coat. "Wrong answer," Rowan said quietly. "Hands on the table where I can see them." The man tensed, but complied. "You're making a mistake. Not the first one. Probably not the last." Rowan glanced at Evelyn. "You all right?" "Fine." Reed appeared from the other direction with one of his deputies. "We've got the other 2 in custody. What about this one?" "He was just offering Miss Vale a friendly warning from Mr. Granger," Rowan said. "Real neighborly of him." The man's eyes darted between them, calculating odds. "You can't hold us. We haven't done anything illegal." "Threatening a passenger on a territorial train is illegal," Reed said. "So is conspiracy to commit kidnapping. And I'm betting when we search you, we'll find weapons, maybe a wanted poster or 2. You're a marshal?" "Coleman Reed, and you just made my job a lot easier." They moved all 3 men to an empty freight car and secured them. Reed's deputies stood guard while Reed questioned them one by one. The first 2 claimed they were just ranch hands heading east for work. The third, the one who'd approached Evelyn, stayed silent for nearly an hour before Reed changed tactics. "Here's the situation," Reed said, sitting across from the man in the freight car. "Your 2 friends already told us you were hired by Silas Granger to grab Miss Vale and bring her back to Denver. They're cooperating in exchange for reduced charges, which means you're the only one facing the full weight of kidnapping and conspiracy charges. They didn't tell you anything because there's nothing to tell." "Really? Then why were you carrying this?" Reed pulled out a piece of paper they'd found during the search, a telegram with instructions to intercept Evelyn's train and detain her by any means necessary. It was signed with Granger's initials. The man's jaw tightened. "You're looking at 10 years minimum," Reed continued. "Maybe more if the judge is feeling harsh." Or you can cooperate, testify about who hired you and what they wanted you to do, and walk away with maybe 2 years, probably less with good behavior. Granger will kill me if I talk. Granger can't touch you in federal custody. And after you testify, I'll personally make sure you're relocated somewhere he can't find you." The man was quiet for a long time. Then finally, "What do you want to know?" By the time they reached Cheyenne that evening, Reed had signed statements from all 3 men detailing Granger's instructions, the payment they'd received, and the broader operation to silence anyone who threatened the land fraud scheme. It was enough to file formal charges against Granger with the Territorial Attorney General, someone Reed trusted to be beyond Granger's influence. But Granger wasn't going to go quietly. They found out just how far he was willing to go when they arrived at the Cheyenne courthouse the next morning. The building was surrounded by armed men wearing deputy badges, all of them hired by Judge Cooper under the pretense of maintaining order. "This is getting ridiculous," Evelyn muttered, watching from the hotel across the street. "It's desperation," Reed said. "Granger knows his operation is collapsing. He's making a last stand. With an army of fake deputies? Not all of them are fake. Cooper has the authority to deputize civilians in times of civil unrest. He's claiming the accusations against Granger have created instability that requires additional security. That's insane. That's corruption." Reed studied the courthouse. "But it also means we can't just walk in there with our prisoners and expect a fair hearing from Cooper." "Then what do we do?" Rowan asked. "We go over his head, directly to the territorial governor in Laramie. That's another 2 days' travel." "You have a better idea?" Rowan looked at the courthouse, at the armed men surrounding it, at the smug confidence in their postures. He was calculating something, weighing options with the same cold precision he'd used during his scouting days. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but you're not going to like it." His plan was simple and completely illegal. They would break into the courthouse after dark, access Cooper's private records, and find proof of his connection to Granger. Financial records, correspondence, anything that could demonstrate the judge was compromised. "That's burglary," Reed said flatly. "Breaking and entering, theft of official documents. You have a badge. Call it an investigation. I don't have jurisdiction over a sitting judge without a warrant, and I can't get a warrant when the only judge available is the one I'm investigating. Then we do it without permission and deal with the consequences later." Reed shook his head. "If we get caught, everything we've built gets thrown out. All the testimony from Granger's men, all the evidence, it becomes fruit of a poisoned tree. Inadmissible. And if we don't get caught, that's a hell of a risk to take on if." Evelyn had been quiet during this exchange, thinking. Finally, she said, "What if there was a way to access Cooper's records legally?" Both men turned to look at her. "Cooper has a clerk," she continued, "a woman named Margaret Finch. I saw her yesterday when we first arrived. She looked unhappy, like someone who hates her job but can't afford to quit." "So?" Rowan said. "So maybe she'd be willing to help us, for the right price or the right motivation." Reed considered this. "It's possible. Clerks have access to everything, but approaching her is dangerous. If she's loyal to Cooper, she'll report us immediately." "Then we need to make sure she's not loyal to Cooper," Evelyn said. "We need to give her a reason to betray him." It took them 2 days to learn enough about Margaret Finch to approach her safely. She was a widow, 43 years old, struggling to support 2 children on a clerk's salary that Cooper kept deliberately low. She'd been passed over for promotions multiple times despite being more qualified than the men hired above her. And according to Reed's sources, she'd been present during several private meetings between Cooper and Granger. They found her leaving the courthouse on a Thursday evening, walking alone through the cold streets toward a modest house on the east side of town. Evelyn approached her first, deliberately non-threatening. "Mrs. Finch? My name is Evelyn Vale. I wonder if I could speak with you for a moment." Margaret stopped, recognition flickering across her face. "You're the woman Judge Cooper issued the warrant for." "Yes, which is why I'm asking you to hear me out before you run or scream for help." Margaret looked around nervously. The street was mostly empty, but not completely. "I shouldn't be talking to you." "I know. But I think you know something isn't right about what's happening. About the warrant, about Granger, about the way Cooper is handling this case. What Judge Cooper does isn't my concern. Even when it's corrupt? Even when he's taking bribes to protect a murderer?" Margaret's expression hardened. "You can't prove that." Actually, I can, but I need your help to do it. Evelyn took a step closer. Mrs. Finch, I know you need this job. I know you can't afford to lose it, but I also know you're a good person who's being forced to be complicit in something terrible. Help us expose Cooper and Granger, and I promise you'll be protected. Reed will make sure of it. The marshal, he's part of this? He's the one investigating Granger. He has testimony from 3 men Granger hired to kidnap me. He has evidence of land fraud going back years. All he needs is proof that Cooper is involved. Margaret was wavering. Evelyn could see it in her eyes, the war between self-preservation and conscience. If I help you, Margaret said slowly, and it goes wrong, my children lose their mother. I go to prison for theft, for betraying a judge. My life is destroyed. If you don't help us, how many more people does Granger destroy? How many more families lose their land, their livelihoods, their loved ones? Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you to do what's right when it matters most. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, What do you need? They met in Reed's hotel room an hour later. Margaret brought a leather portfolio containing documents she'd copied from Cooper's private files. Correspondence with Granger detailing payment schedules, records of land sales where Cooper had ruled in Granger's favor despite clear evidence of fraud, and most damning, a ledger showing regular deposits into a bank account under Cooper's wife's name. This is everything? Reed asked, scanning the documents. Everything I could copy without being noticed, Margaret confirmed. There's more in his office, but I can't access it without the key, and Cooper keeps that with him always. This is enough, Reed said quietly. More than enough. He spent the next hour drafting a formal complaint to the Territorial Attorney General, attaching all the evidence they'd gathered, the testimony from Granger's hired men, the documents from Margaret, the statements from Evelyn about her father's murder, and Granger's threats. This goes out first thing tomorrow morning, Reed said. Once the Attorney General sees this, he'll have no choice but to act. Cooper will be suspended pending investigation. Granger will be arrested. And the warrant against us? Evelyn asked. Dismissed. Between the false testimony we've proven and the evidence of judicial corruption, it won't stand. Rowan, who'd been standing by the window keeping watch, finally spoke. Don't celebrate yet. Granger's not going to let this happen without a fight. He was right. The next morning, before Reed could send the complaint, word reached them that Granger had left Denver. His destination was unknown, but his intentions were clear. He was coming for Evelyn himself. He knows, Reed said, reading the telegram from his contact in Denver. Someone must have tipped him off that we have the evidence. How many men will he bring? Rowan asked. As many as he can afford. Could be 5, could be 20. Then we need to move now. Get Evelyn somewhere safe while you file the complaint. There's nowhere safe, Evelyn said. Not while Granger's free and desperate. He'll tear this territory apart looking for me. Then what do you suggest? She looked at both of them. We end it. Today. We use the evidence to force Granger into a position where he has no choice but to surrender or face immediate arrest. How? Reed asked. We make it public. Not just the Attorney General. We release everything to the newspapers, to every federal marshal in the territory, to the railroad executives who hired Granger in the first place. We make it so big and so public that he can't run, can't hide, can't buy his way out. Reed was nodding slowly. That could work. If the evidence is everywhere, all at once, Granger loses his advantage. No single corrupt official can bury it. But it also means Granger knows exactly where the evidence came from, Rowan said, which makes Evelyn an even bigger target. I'm already a target. At least this way we're fighting back. They spent the morning making copies of everything. Margaret worked with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years managing complex documents. By noon, they had packages ready for the Territorial Attorney General, 3 major newspapers, the Federal Marshal's office, and the railroad's corporate headquarters in Omaha. Reed sent them out through multiple couriers, each taking different routes. It's done, he said, returning to the hotel. By tomorrow, everyone who matters will know what Granger's been doing. And tonight, Evelyn asked, tonight we wait and prepare for Granger to make his move. He came at midnight, not with an army, but with something worse, fire. The hotel's ground floor erupted in flames while most of the guests were sleeping. Someone had poured kerosene along the walls and corridors, then lit it all at once. The building turned into an inferno in minutes. Rowan woke to smoke and heat, and Evelyn coughing in the next room. He kicked down the connecting door and found her on the floor, disoriented from smoke inhalation. "We need to move!" he shouted over the roar of flames. She nodded weakly. Rowan pulled her up, wrapped a wet cloth around her face, and dragged her toward the window. The corridor outside their rooms was completely engulfed. Escape that way was impossible. "Can you climb?" he asked. "I think so." He smashed the window and looked down. They were on the third floor. Below, the street was filling with people responding to the fire, bucket brigades forming, chaos spreading. And standing in the shadows across the street, watching the building burn, was Silas Granger. Their eyes met across the distance. Granger smiled. Rowan pulled Evelyn back from the window. "Change your plans. We're going up." "Up? The roof's on fire." "Not all of it, not yet." They climbed the stairs to the fourth floor, the heat intensifying with every step. The roof access was locked. Rowan shot the lock off and kicked the door open. Outside, the night air was cold and clear and filled with smoke. Half the roof was burning, flames licking toward the sky. The other half was still intact, but it wouldn't be for long. "Now what?" Evelyn gasped, coughing. Rowan looked around. The building next door was close, maybe 8 feet away. The gap between roofs was jumpable if you were desperate enough. They were desperate enough. "When I say jump, you jump," Rowan ordered. "Don't think about it. Don't hesitate. Just jump." "Rowan, trust me." He backed up, got a running start, and leaped across the gap. He landed hard on the next roof, rolled, and came up steady. "Your turn," he called back. Evelyn looked at the gap, at the flames creeping closer, at the street far below. Every instinct screamed at her not to do this. She ran and jumped anyway. For a moment she was airborne, suspended between burning building and safety, between death and survival. Then Rowan's hands caught her arms, pulling her onto solid roofing. They collapsed together, breathing hard. "You all right?" he asked. "No, but I'm alive." They climbed down the back of the neighboring building and emerged onto a side street. Reed was there, looking singed and furious. "Granger?" Rowan asked. "Gone. Disappeared into the crowd as soon as he saw you escape. But he'll be back. He's not done yet." "Neither are we." Rowan looked at Evelyn. "You still want to end this tonight?" "Yes." "Then I know where he'll go." Granger had taken refuge in the one place he still controlled, Judge Cooper's courthouse. The building was locked down, surrounded by Cooper's deputized guards, a fortress in the middle of Cheyenne. But Rowan had spent 15 years infiltrating enemy positions. A courthouse full of hired guards was nothing compared to war party camps or hostile forts. They approached from the east, using shadows and timing. Reed created a distraction at the front entrance, a supposed report of looters taking advantage of the hotel fire. While the guards rushed to investigate, Rowan and Evelyn slipped in through a side window. Inside, the courthouse was dark and silent. They moved through corridors Rowan had memorized during their previous visits, heading toward Cooper's chambers on the second floor. They found Granger there, sitting in Cooper's chair like he owned it, which, in a sense, he did. Cooper himself stood nearby, looking nervous. 2 armed guards flanked the door. Rowan stepped into the room, rifle raised. "Evening, gentlemen." The guards went for their weapons. Rowan shot one in the leg, swung the rifle toward the other. "Don't!" The second guard froze. Evelyn entered behind Rowan, her own pistol steady despite the shaking in her hands. "Hello, Silas." Granger's smile was cold. "Miss Vale, I must say you're remarkably difficult to kill. You murdered my father." "I had your father removed as an obstacle to legitimate business. There's a difference." "Not to me." Cooper was backing toward a side door. Reed appeared there, blocking his escape. "Going somewhere, Judge?" "This is outrageous. You're assaulting officers of the court." "We're arresting a corrupt judge and a murderer," Reed corrected. "Silas Granger, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and about 40 other charges I'll think of by tomorrow." Granger laughed. "You think arresting me changes anything? I own half the officials in this territory. I'll be out by morning." "Not this time," Evelyn said. "By tomorrow morning, every newspaper from here to Washington will have printed the evidence of what you've done." Your railroad contacts will disown you. Your political allies will run from you, and there won't be a judge corrupt enough or stupid enough to let you walk. The smile finally faded from Granger's face. You're bluffing.
Am I? Ask Judge Cooper about the documents his clerk copied. Ask him about the bank records we found. Ask him about the statements from the 3 men you sent to kidnap me on the train. Granger's eyes went to Cooper, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor.
You see, Evelyn continued, you made a mistake. You thought you could control everything, the law, the courts, the truth itself. But you forgot that eventually someone would care enough to fight back. Someone would be willing to risk everything to expose you. And that someone is you? A governess from Philadelphia who barely survived her first winter on the frontier? No. That someone is everyone you've hurt, everyone whose land you stole, whose family you destroyed, whose life you ruined for profit. I'm just the one who survived long enough to make you pay for it. Granger moved fast for a man his age, pulling a derringer from his vest. But Rowan was faster. The rifle cracked once. Granger's gun clattered to the floor, along with 2 of his fingers. He screamed, clutching his hand.
That's for Evelyn's father, Rowan said quietly, and for every other person you've killed or hurt. Consider yourself lucky I'm only taking fingers. Reed moved in with handcuffs. Within minutes, both Granger and Cooper were secured and being led out of the courthouse by federal marshals who'd arrived with Reed. Outside, dawn was breaking over Cheyenne. The hotel fire had been extinguished, leaving a blackened skeleton of a building. Survivors milled about, being tended to by volunteers.
Evelyn stood on the courthouse steps, watching the sunrise, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Or the beginning of it, anyway. Rowan stood beside her, rifle slung over his shoulder. How do you feel? Tired, scared, relieved, all of it at once. That's normal. She looked at him. What happens now? Now Reed finishes building his case. Granger and Cooper stand trial. With all the evidence we've gathered, they'll both be convicted. And us? The warrant against us gets dismissed. We're free to go. Back to the ranch? Rowan was quiet for a moment. If you want to. It's still winter, still isolated, still hard living. I know, but it's also home. Or it was starting to feel like it. Was? She smiled. Is. It is starting to feel like home. They returned to Iron Creek 3 weeks later, after Granger's arrest made headlines across the territory, and the warrant against them was officially dismissed. The town that had once wanted Evelyn gone now looked at her differently, with respect, even admiration. The ranch was buried in snow when they arrived, but everything was intact. Tom had done a good job looking after the livestock. That first night back, they sat by the fire in the cabin, both too exhausted to do much except exist in the same space. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly, for everything, for taking me in, for protecting me, for believing my story when no one else did. You don't need to keep thanking me. Yes, I do. Because you changed my life. You showed me I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive things I never imagined surviving. Rowan stared into the fire. You did that yourself. I just didn't get in your way. You did more than that. You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and you stayed even when it would have been easier to walk away. Walking away's never been my strength. No. Your strength is staying even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when everyone tells you not to care. She paused. You asked me once why I thought you were helping me. I think I finally understand. It wasn't about your sister. It was about proving to yourself that you could still protect someone, that you weren't too broken to care. Rowan didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was rough. Maybe you're right, or maybe I just saw someone who needed help and decided that was reason enough. Either way, I'm grateful. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the fire burn low. Outside, snow began falling again, soft and quiet, blanketing the valley in white. Spring came slowly to Iron Creek that year. The snow melted inch by reluctant inch, revealing brown grass and mud and the promise of new growth. Evelyn planted a garden behind the cabin, working the soil with hands that were now permanently calloused and strong. Rowan repaired the barn, fixed fences, and slowly started accepting invitations from neighboring ranchers. They never talked about what they were to each other. Partners, maybe. Friends, certainly. something more complicated than either word could capture. Evelyn never went back east. The documents she'd hidden in Philadelphia were retrieved by federal marshals and used as evidence in Granger's trial. He was convicted on 37 counts and sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. Judge Cooper was disbarred and imprisoned for corruption. Margaret Finch was offered a position with the Territorial Attorney General's office at twice her previous salary. She accepted. As for Rowan and Evelyn, they built a life on that remote ranch in the high country. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It wasn't easy or simple or free from hardship, but it was theirs.
And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the valley was peaceful, they'd sit on the porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. They'd talk about small things, the cattle, the weather, plans for the next season. Or they wouldn't talk at all, just exist in the comfortable silence of two people who'd survived hell together and come out the other side still standing.
Because that's what the frontier taught them both. Survival wasn't about being perfect or fearless or never making mistakes. It was about showing up every day, doing the work, and refusing to let the hard things break you. It was about finding reasons to stay when everything else told you to leave. And sometimes, if you were lucky, it was about finding someone worth staying for. Years later, travelers passing through Iron Creek would hear stories about the woman who'd taken down one of the territory's most powerful criminals and the scout who'd helped her do it. Some of the details got exaggerated with each telling: the number of men they'd fought off, the dramatic confrontation in the courthouse, the fire that had nearly killed them both. But the core of the story remained true. Two broken people had found each other in the middle of nowhere, had refused to accept defeat, and had changed an entire territory in the process. And in the end, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything.